How do you decide the financing dates and possessions date? Like, is it like, how do you decide that?
Depends on the buyer and seller, right?
Okay, so
So
you,
usually for conditions, we give 2 weeks. Usually there will be 2 weeks of conditions because generally the banks, even if you have pre-approval in place, bank will need a couple of weeks to finalize the mortgage. And so I generally like to have the property inspection and financing conditions at the same time. So it's just easier. You have to send one form instead of having to, and you just have to remember one date versus having to remember multiple things. So that's one. So about 2 weeks for financing. That is generally acceptable by the sellers as well because that tends to be the industry norm. However, it can be less, right? Or it can be more. Depends on the situations. Most sellers don't like it to be more because they don't want the property tied up for that long. So that's how the conditions will work. So, in terms of closing the deal, I was just having this conversation with one of our realtors yesterday. He's like, oh, can I close 3 days after condition removal? It's really tight because what happens is the seller's brokerage has to send all the conveyancing instructions to all the parties, and then the buyer's lawyer needs to get lending instructions from the lender. They need to prepare all paperwork. They have to get that signed. Buyers and sellers' lawyers have to coordinate, and the lawyers may not be available right during that time. So, a good rule of thumb that I ask our agents to follow would be 2 weeks for conditions and 2 weeks after condition removal to do the closing, or sometimes it's 60 days in total from the time the purchase contract is written to the closing date. So any of those times would work. So it depends on the buyers and sellers.
so the question is now that because seller is not obligated to give you the information, and if there's a multiple option, this could be the things that they can refuse the offer based on the financing dates than the possession dates.
Well, they could, like if there's a multiple offer situation, most sellers, well, depends actually, there's a different terms, but a lot of sellers will pick an offer that doesn't have conditions. So that if there's an unconditional offer, because then the deal is done, right? So it makes it easier. But yeah, it's a negotiation between the buyer and seller to figure out sort of what the conditions and stuff like what the dates will be.